Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Sales and selling. Well, that's what this whole show is about. That's what, so many of our guests are about. But today, we got the cream of the crop. We got the top dog. We got the guy who knows what he's talking about and walks the talk, Mr. Mark Cox from In the Funnel and inthefunnel.com. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, David. What a pleasure to be here. I'm Canadian, so I have a real problem with that intro, right? So it's not in our nature to boast, but I appreciate it nonetheless.
So humble, yet so brilliant. What can you do? It's a curse, it's a blessing and a curse, all combined. So you have a fantastic book called Learn to Love Selling, and is it okay if I spill the beans on what I think? Okay.
Yes, please. So I'm interested.
When you hear the title, Learn to Love Selling, you might think, oh, it's a mindset book. It's a book about, man, sales is the most noble profession. Sales is amazing. You gotta do all the crazy crap that you hate, but somehow learn to love it. And the book is not that at all. It is like a step-by-step blueprint, handbook, Bible, if you will, of how to do sales the right way, the intelligent way, the way that sales is going to be in 2024 and 2025 and 2026 and whenever you're listening to this. So this is like the modern how-to step-by-step sales manuals. And I want to say this other thing for professional sellers.
Thank you.
Not for amateurs, not for part-timers, not for dabblers, not for people who's like, well, let's see if I can meet my number this quarter. Let's see if I can tread water, middle of the pack. This is really, I mean this completely 1,000%, Mark. This is the, and we're going to get into the content here in a moment, but this is the playbook for the A-grade sellers. So if you have less than A-grade ambition, I'll tell you what, don't call Mark, don't go to the website, don't buy the book, stop listening to this show, get out of here. But if you're an A seller, you want to grab a pen, grab a pad, and let's jump right in. Mark, I'd love you to start with a little bit about your professional journey.
Sure.
And what brought you to the work that you're doing today at In the Funnel, and what were some fun pit stops along the way?
Well, David, again, thanks so much for the gracious comments about the book. So most of my career was just spent running large sales organizations and outsourcing or technology companies. And some really good things happened along that journey. At one point in time, I negotiated and closed $1 billion transaction because outsourcing deals are big. Yeah. And so I had some really good things and some challenging things happen along that journey. And at some point in time, as most, heads of sales find themselves, I was looking for a new adventure. And while I was doing it, a couple of smaller companies kind of came to me and said, listen, we can't afford to attract you, but why don't you come in and just help us while you're in the middle of your search campaign, and you can have an office downtown, while you're doing your searching. So help us one day a week, and then you can keep looking for your new adventure. Well, as it turned out, before I knew it, I was doing this with 3 companies, and I had some final interviews with a large technology company based in the US looking for a leader for Canada, which is where I'm based. And I left one of these kind of smaller companies. There were about 60 people at the time, a SaaS organization about 10 years ago. Literally 2 doors down in downtown Toronto, I go to this interview. And I'm in the middle of this, maybe the 4th or 5th interview, and there's about 6, 7 people in the room. And right in the middle of this thing, I have this epiphany that says, I don't want to do this. I'd actually rather go back and help that other company I just came from. So I left the interview. And again, the client was only 2 doors away. Instead of going left, I go right to a coffee shop, sit down, open a laptop, and play around with a few spreadsheets. And then I called my wife, Donna, And I said, listen, I don't think I'm going to work for anybody anymore. I think I can build a business, just starting with consulting. And David, that was 10 years ago. And, let's call it 140, 150 clients consulting go. But the business evolved because every time we were in consulting, it evolved into the team needed training.
Yeah.
And so about 6-7 years ago, we pivoted and we moved the consulting business into a training business for leaders, for salespeople, and for SDRs or BDRs, or what they used to call cold calling, 40 or 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And today we do that all over Canada and the US, and we do it in person and virtually remote. And we do, for large teams, we do private custom work. And for smaller teams, they just send people into our workshops, public workshops, 2 or 3 people at a time.
Nice.
Yeah,
really,
it's great
really
fun.
great.
Amazing fun.
So you have, unlike a lot of sales coaches or sales trainers or sales consultants, you really have a very dialed in methodology and a structure and a format to your training engagements, consulting engagements, and it's really skill building in 4 or 5 different areas. And you detail this, of course, in the book, in the Learn to Love Selling book. And it starts with, I think, what some people might think of as marketing, but it's really not. And of course, I'm talking about the ability to clearly articulate your value proposition. So walk us through what a sales professional, not the marketing team, because there's marketing value prop, and I think there is something very different, which is the sales value prop. Tell us how you teach that to your clients, how you teach that to your leaders and your teams.
Well, it's a really interesting question, right? Because you meet so many people, and we're always doing our social events at certain times of the year, and I'll go chat with somebody. My wife will be one place, I'll be another place, and I'll go chat with somebody, and she say, "Hey, I see you met somebody new. There's Peter over there." I said, "Yeah," and she goes, "What does Peter do?" And I'll say, "Well, Peter works for the ABC company." And she'll go, "Exactly. Oh, what does ABC do?" And I go, "I have no idea whatsoever. I have none whatsoever." So I think every time, if you're in professional sales today, you have no right to speak to a client or a prospect unless you can answer the most obvious question. And that question is going to be, who are you folks and what do you do? And when someone asks that question, they're not looking for the 7-minute soliloquy written in iambic pentameter, explaining what you do, starting with the origin of the company 47 years ago from a small farm in Saskatchewan, rural Saskatchewan. What they're looking for is really, their brain is looking to understand 3 things. What do you guys do? How does what you do help me? So what desired business outcome do you provide me? What do you do for me? And then third, what's unique and different about you given my gazillion other options in the marketplace to do the same thing? So their brain's processing, if they're trying to figure out, why should I listen and why should I care to you? What do you guys do? What desired outcome are you going to provide me? And what's the competitive differentiation for you versus the other folks who can help me get that desired outcome? So it's a bit of the Mark Twain, David, where, the statement said, "Hey, I wrote you a long letter. If I'd taken more time, I would have written you a short letter."
Yeah.
The people we're speaking to can't retain information. Very few things we say are interesting to them. And the forgetting curve is alive and well. So the idea is, first, whiteboard each of these 3 elements. Okay, get them on a whiteboard. You can have 10, 12 versions of, hey, how do we explain our core capability or what we do? What desired outcomes do we provide? Jot them all down. And then edit them and make some decisions so it's concise.
Wow.
So that's value. That's from a sales perspective, value proposition messaging. And they're going to leverage this a dozen times a day. Because the client I spoke to 3 weeks ago who's re-engaging with me, they don't remember what makes us unique and different. We're not that important to them. Yeah. They have their own life to worry about. So you're constantly reiterating this in all your email communications, marketing communications, verbal communications. You've got to make sure this is clear, because this is how people decide whether to let you progress to the next stage of the sales cycle.
Are you loving this interview as much as I am? Holy smokes. Hey, you know what this reminds me of? There's a fantastic sales book that you got to get your hands on right here, right now. It's called Do It Selling. How do I know it's great? Well, I wrote it and you need to read it. Pop over right now to doitselling.com. Now, back to our interview. And I've already used a couple times in referring to your bookmark this concept of it's the handbook, it's the playbook, but you have something called the in the funnel sales playbook.
We do.
That you custom develop for each one of your long-term clients. You walk them through this sort of 5-step thinking, doing, documenting process. Beyond value prop, which obviously is step 1, just walk us through the highlights and the key points of the entire playbook development process that you do with your clients.
Amazing. Thank you. So team, I think of it this way. Think of a chart or a process flow. On the left-hand side, whatever core business capability you have is there. What do? You're a manufacturing business, you're a software business, you're a services business, you're a coaching business. You need to think about 5 things to convert that core capability into revenue on the far right of the piece of paper. And these are the 5 things, and they're serial and linear, meaning you have to think of these in order. The first 2 are very strategic. We talked about value proposition messaging. Value proposition ends up being the way you articulate how you expect to compete and win in your market. So it's pretty tough to do. You got to make sure you're crisp. Then you have to prioritize the pursuit of that market. Okay, so what does your ideal client look like? Who do I want as a client? Size, scale, business problem they have, way they value my services. And then how am I going to build a pipeline of those opportunities, either through my existing base, growing share of wallet, or new logos? So I have to, second step, target market. Prioritize the pursuit of your target market. Other people call this territory management. If I know those 2 things, then I can go to the third step, which is awareness campaigns. Now, larger firms, we have marketing departments. Smaller businesses, this is just trying to get the attention and awareness of your market, okay? And in the best case scenario, these things actually get a digital client to step into your business and triggers a conversation. But in the worst case scenarios, your website, LinkedIn posts, social media marketing, your white papers, all these things provide a credibility shield when you do step 4 of the playbook, which is demand generation. Actively creating, I like the way you position it, frankly, in your book, David, you call it just triggering a conversation.
Yeah.
We're triggering a conversation with the ideal client profile we want to get in front of. So demand generation. And the first 4 steps, value prop, territory management, awareness campaigns, and demand generation, those 4 stages will create a qualified sales opportunity for us. 5th stage is sales execution. And as part of that, we need to think about a sales process, sales strategy, and we need to understand a little bit about funnel management to understand the volume and velocity of deals we need to be working to hit our goals and objectives. So those are the steps of our sales playbook. And in fairness, we left the middle step out intentionally. So we stayed away from any form of marketing, and we just get through value prop, territory management, demand generation, and sales execution. That's the focus of this book. And finally, David, a lot of people in our world, between you and I, you had so many great guests on the podcast, so have I. And there's ways of getting to what we do. One way is writing a book, and then you see these folks who, from the book, training comes out of the book.
Yeah.
We maybe are slow learners. We did quite the opposite. We've been training teams really for 15, 20 years, but as in the funnel, about 10 years. So we've been refining the curriculum. And then finally, instead of having somebody come to a workshop, we said, okay, let's get it down in a book. And that's our first book here, Learn to Love Selling, the Universal B2B Sales Playbook.
Absolutely. That is so great. I want to go into demand generation because this goes into what you were saying earlier about outbound and quote unquote cold calling, which should never ever be cold. And you make a brilliant point. You make a brilliant point in the book and give very specific details of how to warm up every single call. But that chapter begins, it's a dream sequence. And I'm hearing the music, the harps, the sun is rising. Walk us through that dream sequence because I thought that was particularly brilliant and I love it so much.
Well, I won't explain it as well as you because I don't have the theatrical background you've got. I mean, it just sounds so much more interesting when you say it. But the idea was, I'm lying in bed and I've got this world where all I do is respond to inbound leads for the SaaS business that I'm running at the time. And in fact, we can't even keep up with the inbound leads because they're coming in so fast and furious. And the other thing is they're all perfect. All the inbound leads are our ideal client profiles. And then something happens and I wake up because I've been dreaming because that's never going to happen for any business. So in all the time we've been doing this, we only have found 2 companies in any industry that actually just responded to inbound leads. And some of these things are also a point in time type of situation. So the reality for all of us is we have to create demand for our product or service. So we've got to proactively get out there and create demand. And you're going to hear lots of stuff. The sales world is crowded, right? Because this is not today, it will be, but today it's not a formal profession that you learn with all the other courses in your MBA. We learn from lots of people like us. And there's lots of different opinions on, hey, does demand generation work? Or should I just use social media marketing? Or should I just do email blasts to a gazillion people? And so there are lots of theories, but the reality of it is we need a multi-channel approach to engaging our ideal customer in an initial conversation. And we earn that conversation by showing them we actually do know who they are and we can articulate our value proposition. So we're trying to leverage a bit of reciprocity with research so that when we're reaching out, they know they're not one of 7,000 reach outs. Yeah. They know we actually know who they are and we're humanizing that reach out with a very specific reason for the call. And our belief is, as yours, David, which I enjoyed in your book, do it selling, which is absolutely awesome. I'd rather have 20 great conversations in a given week than 40 lousy conversations. So this is where we get quite intentional about doing demand generation, but there is an amount of professional persistence that's required to make this happen. And the stats will tell us we've got to be more professionally persistent than you would logically think.
Yes. Well, there's so much good stuff in that chapter. So you talk about, and this is 1,000% true in my experience as well, outbound demand generation is the most avoided activity in sales. And you write that most salespeople and entrepreneurs, number one, don't know how to do it, or at least don't know how to do it well, which means don't know how to do it. And they want to avoid the rejection that comes with it. Yes. And so you lay out, I think I didn't count them, but is it like, it's like 14 touches over the course of about 10 days. And it is incredibly, when you mention professionally persistent, it is very structured. It is very, I'm saying this in the best possible way. It's very programmatic.
Yes.
So we're not leaving the sales professionals guessing like, well, Mark says we should call and email and LinkedIn and text, and I just don't know what to do first and second and third. And you lay it all out. I mean, it is a day by day, touch by touch process. I'm curious, Mark, how did you and the team cook up that formula? And early on, was it not quite enough? And then did we go to too much? And is this kind of the Goldilocks, purely refined version that we have now? So what's the history of it?
Yeah, what a great question. Well, the history of many of these things, David, comes from most of the technology providers that enable this in one way or the other. So started with CRM systems, now with AI, now it's full-born contact management, marketing automation, all these things. And this is where, if you track the research they do, so instead of having Mark's line of sight or in the funnel's line of sight, or even, our thousands of people we've trained, their line of sight, these companies have millions of salespeople leveraging their technology. And it's cloud-based, so they can track performance.
Yeah.
So whether it's HubSpot, Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, Zoho, they'll publish research where they'll get in very specific about how many touch points does it take to make contact for different levels of business and different levels of buyers. And then what I think you've got to do, team, is you've just got to do what you're comfortable with. And the amount of reach outs and touch points is dependent upon the size of your target market. So if I only have 7 clients that I can potentially sell to because I do mega outsourcing deals, I'm going to need one type of strategy, which is quite different than in the funnel, because we can actually work with anyone who's got, between 5 and 200 salespeople. And there's a lot of those companies. So time I'm spending chasing one is time we're not spending chasing another. So we want a formal program, David, to start a pursuit, to trigger activities where we can be comfortable we've been professionally persistent. We want a yes. The second best answer is no, because now we know. And the worst answer is we just don't get any response whatsoever. And so, but we do want to step away at some point in time and throw them back into a nurture campaign. So we stay close with, the latest research coming out of these technology providers. We also have so many clients that we see what they're doing with their very large sales teams. So, who are doing this in volume, what's working, what isn't working. But it's all got to be, you said, how do we get comfortable? Even our model, which is professionally persistent, in a given week, we might leave 2 voicemails, a couple of LinkedIn reach outs, and maybe 1 email blast. But, sometimes people come back and say, well, that's too professionally persistent. We say, well, hang on. We've left 2 voicemails. How could it be less professionally persistent? We left 2 voicemails. And by the way, all anyone ever has to do is either email us back, respond to the LinkedIn message, or call us and say, not interested. We'll take them off the list.
Totally.
So we have to be comfortable. We humanize it. Our salespeople bring their own flair to the table.
Yeah.
In many ways, they become better than me because they've got their own flair. They're doing it all day, every day. And I'm kind of doing it 1 day a week, or, if I'm lucky, based on what goes on these days. But that's the approach we take. But we do like the science of knowing what's the data say in terms of, how tough is it to get in touch with somebody?
Yeah.
And how professionally persistent do we need to be?
Love that. Now, the research that you recommend in the book, you mention that you need to earn the right to have that conversation. Earn the right because the conversation should have some value for the prospect. And you say, research them on LinkedIn. In my head, I'm going, okay, got that. That makes sense. Research the company and industry, website, 10K reports, Google searches. Maybe you set some Google alerts. Okay, makes sense. Got that. Then you hit me in the head with like a 2x4 of value. You said, well, that's actually not enough because you also need to have a unique point of interest. And I had never heard of this concept. I've never heard of this construct. Tell us about unique point of interest, or POI, what that is, why it's important, and how it can be a difference maker.
It really, what we're trying to trigger is the theory of reciprocity. And so many smarter people than us have been thinking about psychology and behavioral science for years and years and years, all the way back to Robert Cialdini in 1980 with influence. It was one of the 6 things that he said would drive behavior. And it does. So when you're so gracious to me at the beginning of this podcast in terms of an intro, it's in my DNA to find a way to be gracious back to you. Most human beings respond that way. So what we find when you do the research and find a point of interest, which we'll talk about in a second, somebody's going to say a couple things. Immediately their brain goes to, well, maybe David's not the same as the 21-year-old marketing folks that are doing telemarketing, just blasting with no training whatsoever. And by the way, David's done some research on me. I'm a little flattered. And so that might not be enough, David, to get somebody to return a phone call. But if they listen to a voicemail and you say, hey, David, I was just incredibly excited to see you released your latest book. I've ordered it from Amazon. I can't wait to read it. Reason I'm reaching out is we actually help businesses like yours achieve double-digit growth in a short period of time. I wanted to talk to you. I had a couple of specific ideas for your business. And again, I'm going to leverage a quote from Do It Selling. You may be busy enough where you're not going to respond to that. But even if you listen to part of that message, because I've dropped the point of interest, you're creating an impression of me in your mind, even if you don't respond.
Yeah.
So you might go check me out on LinkedIn. Still not going to respond. But what that means is the next time I reach out, you might be in the car and see my number come up. Maybe you'll take it. And so even when somebody's not responding, the quality of our reach out, leveraging that point of interest where you're earning the right for a conversation, that's where you're going to get some engagement. And before we started today, both of us talked about, a lot of people invite themselves to become on each of our shows and, our podcasts. And sometimes it's a generic email blast where you can tell they're just blasting out to anybody.
Yes.
And the odd time somebody's going to reach out and go, you know what? I love this quote from your book, blah, blah, blah. They're in. Or when people are trying to sell me something for in the funnel, all they'd have to do is go, hey, Mark, I was on your website. I saw your video on value proposition message. Let me practice my value proposition and see if it works on you. It would be so easy. I'm ethically and morally engaged. I'm required to return that call.
It's true.
No one has ever done it.
Yeah.
So this is the point of interest might be something that's happened in the business, might be something that's happened in the industry, might be something about their career that they've posted on, might be something about a LinkedIn post they recently posted.
Yeah.
Where you say, that's really resonated. Doesn't have to do anything to do with sales training. They may have talked about something about culture or values or, something about the business where they were doing charitable work.
Yeah.
And just say, I want to reach out, a couple things to talk about, but boy, I love the fact that you give to the local food bank. That's the charity of choice for In the Funnel too. How cool. Thanks for doing that. Boom. You're just finding some way to earn a little bit of their time.
Are you loving this interview as much as I am? Holy smokes. Hey, you know what this reminds me of? There's a fantastic sales book that you got to get your hands on right here, right now. It's called Do It Selling. How do I know it's great? Well, I wrote it and you need to read it. Pop over right now to doitselling.com. Now, back to our interview. One of the brilliant things on these calls, the way that you write about it in the book, is it's question based, it's curiosity based, and there is genuine value in speaking with the salesperson, because the salesperson is not in pitch mode. The salesperson is in discovery and diagnostic mode.
Yes.
And I always feel that your marketing process and your sales process should be valuable to prospects, even if they don't buy.
Yes.
So I talked to Mark, I'm the VP of sales. I had a 30-minute call with Mark. I learned a lot about where we're strong and where we're weak. We might not be in a position to invest in his consulting and training services, but man, I learned something. And the moment that I need sales training or that I want sales consulting, I am calling this dude right back because he gave me insights during the sales conversation.
They'll never forget.
Right.
And you and I would never forget either, David. And by the way, you articulate the same thing beautifully in Do It Selling. Do It Selling, folks. You should pick this up. But it's one of the things I absolutely loved about reading your book, which was you start a conversation and say, listen, do you mind if I treat you like a client right from the start?
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I'm going to guide this conversation so it's of most value. And I might give you some courageous truths, but that's what we do with our clients. We help them. Are you okay if we do that?
Yeah.
And so if I'm on the other end of this, I'm going, first of all, why wouldn't I want that? Because you know what the alternative is? The alternative is, hey, Mark, would you mind sitting back for 10 minutes while I pull up some PowerPoint and slowly end your life and slowly drag the fun out of your day? And by the way, if you have any questions, I'm not particularly interested in them and I'm unable to answer them. I have no idea. So this is what we were doing, right? Or even worse, let me show you a demo. Let me show you a demo. If you want to start to show me a demo, my Zoom goes off. I'm sorry, my Zoom, life's too short. I still want to have some joy every day. So I think this idea of earning the right, and really you're showing them the value of what you can provide.
Yeah.
And David, you and I both had clients who said, listen, they reach back out a year or two later and they say, we had a conversation a couple of years ago, and they'll remember, and you and I won't.
Right.
This was 500 conversations ago.
Yeah.
And they say, you were really gracious about it, and I got some value, and I wanted to circle back because now I'm running a more meaningful team, and we've got budget, and we'd like to have a conversation. So it's also the way most people want to spend their life.
Yes.
I want to spend my life kind of helping people. I want to be successful, but I'll be successful if I want to focus on helping others. That's why we do this.
Yes. Completely right. I love that. It's funny. And so we're in a mutual admiration society together, which I truly appreciate. As I was reading your book, I was reflecting on two things. Number one, we're both pretty smart sales guys. Number two, I just fire hose people with all kinds of crazy nonsense. You create this dense, flourless chocolate cake. So it's like the old Mark Twain, if I had more time, I would have written you a short letter. You took the time, you've condensed, shortened, and it's the greatest hits. Specifically, I'm talking about your discovery questions. And you say something that you say so many things in here that I completely agree with and have experienced as accidental successes along the way. You will sell more if your discovery is more thorough, if your discovery is more professional, if your discovery is more profound. And so you talk about in a discovery conversation, and I love that you call them sales multipliers. They're not discovery multipliers. They're not conversation multipliers. They will actually multiply the amount of what you sell and how much you sell, because they are sales multipliers that invites the prospect to expand on what they just said, go into more detail, go into more far-ranging consequences of this problem that they have or this outcome that they want. So without spoiling the full surprise, because there's so many great questions here in the book, talk about what is a sales multiplier and raise our consciousness into kind of when and how to use them.
Well, thank you, by the way. And so the short answer is when, of course, in any conversation, the person who actually speaks more is going to enjoy the conversation more. So when we're having a conversation or interaction with another human being, this. You've got those friends when you meet them and they're all about you. Oh, tell me about this. And David, you've been through this 3 times. I've been through it once. So many people want to talk about the book. And, I'd love to do it professionally, but on a personal level, every once in a while I go, hey, today is my day off and I want to talk about hockey and I want to talk about music and I don't want to bore, but so the idea is, when we walk into a sales call, we already know everything we know. The whole purpose here is to learn about how we might be able to help them. We've got to earn the right to get them to share what's going on with smart questions and value and insight. But when they do, we have to remember, and a great guy named Oscar Trimboli, Deep Listening was one of the books he wrote, magnificent. But he shared on our podcast, he'd be a great guest on your podcast, He said, people think at 900 words a minute, but they speak at 125. So whenever they're talking, they're not getting it all out. They're only getting 17% out.
Yeah.
So we've known this. I've never had those numbers before, but this idea of saying, okay, how do we just take a pregnant pause, let them finish, and then say, hey, that's interesting. Tell me more. Or how, what, why, when. Multiply the depth of the conversation.
Yeah.
Toyota talks about the 5 whys when they're trying to think through a problem. It's the 5 why. I think that the more most clients, when they're engaging a new product or service or a solution, they're going to work with the sales individual who knows them and their situation best. You think it's going to be the one about price and all. It has nothing to do with it. As long as you're in some world, the same world. But it's people make decisions by trusting somebody, and they'll trust them if you understand their world.
Yes.
And so when we do keynotes or when we're doing training, the first question is, how do I close better? And what's the magic phrase to trick somebody into moving? There is no magic phrase. Do better discovery and treat it as if I was an investor in that business, and I'm trying to help them solve a problem. How do I figure out how big the problem is, what the value is, what the ROI is, and why they should make this decision?
Yeah.
And if they shouldn't make this decision, tell them.
Right.
And you'll like this, David. We're probably not far off in age. I used to love a TV show called Mad Men. You're theatrical. It's the best TV show ever.
Yeah.
But it was based on David Ogilvy's book called Confessions of an Advertising Man. This book I just read for fun a couple of weekends back. First of all, spectacular. And I kept thinking to myself how relevant it was for today, because he talked about this. Even in the earliest days of the advertising business, the approach was treat the client as if it's your business and help them make decisions that you would make if you were an investor. He wrote the book in 1963. I mean, it's just 60 years ago. Nothing changes. Stop pitching, start helping.
Right. So good. So good. Well, that is actually a beautiful sentiment to land the plane on.
Awesome.
So I know people are going to want to get connected and stay connected to more Mark Cox brilliance. Where can we send people links, book, podcast? Where do you want to send them? What gifts do we have to share with them?
So LinkedIn is the best thing, folks. Please connect with me. I'd love to connect with you. If you've got any questions about today's podcast, please let me know. So Mark Cox, our company is called In the Funnel. It's MARKCOX. The book is called Learn to Love Selling, the Universal B2B Sales Playbook. The other book everybody listening today should absolutely pick up is Do It Selling, 77 Instant Action Ideas to Land Better Clients, Bigger Deals, and Higher Fees. And David sells specifically to coaches and trainers. But one of the things that hit me about this book team is these 77 ideas are universal in B2B sales. There's wisdom here that is just universal. And I'm going to tell everybody the truth. The book was so good when I read it to prep for David on our podcast that I immediately bought Do It Marketing, which is another book, because we're going to learn something from Do It Marketing at our place, 100% for sure. But that's how you get in touch with us. And David, what a pleasure being on your podcast. I was so excited for today. I knew it was going to be a great conversation. Thank you.
Well, Mark, there's that Canadian reciprocity once again. There is that Canadian reciprocity. So it's funny. We truly are like-minded in so many ways. It's funny. An early sales mentor of mine said to me, David, this was when my marketing book came out. And someone gave me the feedback, hey, David, I like what you've done with the ideas. And I was getting all incensed. Like, what do you mean? This is my original IP. I like what you've done with the ideas. What kind of crazy comment is this? And a sales mentor of mine said, David, you have to understand, any topic under the sun, there is 6 good pages on marketing. And your marketing book is a variation and a subset and a translation of those 6 good pages of marketing. There's 6 good pages on leadership. There's 6 good pages on innovation. There's 6 good pages on parenting. There's 6 good pages on money management or health or weight loss. There are 6 good pages on sales and selling. All 6 of them are in the book, Learn to Love Selling.
Oh, thanks, David. That's great.
But truly, I mean, as far as standing on the shoulders of giants, which we all do,
For sure we do.
your interpretation, your filter, your lens, your perspective, your experience and expertise comes through the book. It comes through interviews like this. And I just appreciate being your brand new friend. And I'm looking forward to many more fun conversations with you as well, Mark.
Well, those are taking place for sure. So thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.